Happy Father's Day.
Thank you, Brandon, and happy Father's Day to you too.
Well, it's
Okay,
actually not. It's not Father's Day.
full disclosure, we're about a week late. You were here at the house on Father's Day. We hoped to film the video, but there wasn't enough time. So we're doing it about a week after the fact. But what we're going to talk about today is so timely. It doesn't really matter like whether it's Father's Day this year, next year, last year. It's what do you call that? Like evergreen
Evergreen.
information, right? Yeah,
It is.
evergreen.
It is evergreen, and this is one of the most common questions I get. And by the way, we talk Father's Day here. This applies to mothers. This applies to basically any
Yes,
parent out there that's
parents,
parents. Yeah.
caregivers.
Yes, but what spurred this, Dad, is like a very common question we get here on the channel is how can I set my kid or kids up for financial success?
Yeah,
And by financial success, that there's a big spectrum there. That could be investing, that could be budgeting, finance, good with credit cards, like really just
debt control. Yeah,
debt. There's a whole spectrum, and
yeah,
I like to say, I was raised in such a amazing environment where money was a topic we covered. It ended up
right.
being a career path for me, and I'm
Yeah.
so fortunate that that's the case. I know that's not the case for a lot of people, so I wanted to essentially provide today like just a more loose discussion about maybe some things you did for me growing up, maybe some things
Mm-hmm.
that I can do for my kid, for Ava. Like go through a whole gambit of tips and suggestions
Yeah,
and
yeah.
essentially practices that we feel would be a sound thing to do to help get your kids ready for their financial future.
Well, very, very important. And it's interesting. I'll be very interested in the discussion, Brandon, because the last time we talked about this topic was a few years ago, before you had a child. Now you're the provider of it. So, yeah, let me just start by saying this is not something that is going to shock anybody, but I hear it all the time, and especially in our academy, that one of the biggest challenges that we have is that we don't have a society where the parents are financially literate. There's so many people, and I've ragged on the school system for so long now that they don't provide proper education in this field of finance, etc. So a lot of people, the majority maybe, are getting off to a tough start because how do you teach someone to manage money financially or to invest properly if you don't know that yourself? So that's something that hopefully things are changing a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of good information out there now that you can educate yourself. So
I think that applies to so many topics. It's like, why would you take advice, on fitness from someone who's just not fit themselves, right?
mm-hmm.
For someone who is, claims to be such and such a teacher, and they have no experience or knowledge. It does start with the parents,
Yeah,
educating themselves. And I would like to think that anybody watching this video, well, they're already obviously taking the first steps. And in fact, they're probably down this road of getting themselves in a position where they can more so lead by example. They have the habits themselves ingrained where it's more so just teaching by example, right? Kudos to anybody who is
yeah.
watching, because yeah, that's the big first step. And then I think like one of the things I really want to talk about later is books, but I have a full maybe topic about that, Dad. So maybe we'll leave that. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Uh,
what do you? Sorry, go for it.
so let me just sort of wrap up what we just said. But essentially, it all comes down to being a role model, and whether it's financial or whether that's anything in life. If you're teaching, and we're so lucky, we just were able to spend a week with your 2-year-old and a bit child, and I was reminded of how everything you say, everything you do, that child is listening and watching, and they're repeating, right? So if you give them good habits, then they will probably repeat those. And if you give them bad habits or bad language or whatever the case may be, don't blame the kid for saying something that you don't want to hear because they heard it from you. So that's kind of developing those good habits in your child, and realizing that you're always being watched and you're a role model.
And that is one of the things that I guess is easier said than done, because you look at it this way: if you want to look through the whole cycle of parenting, and then maybe as the parent you didn't have parents that were financially literate, or you didn't have parents that were good with money.
Right.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
that's how you were raised, and you have to essentially break that cycle. I guess with education, I think is the biggest thing.
Well, I agree with that. I would also add to that, though, Brandon, there's not only the education, but there has to be the willingness to share. And, I worked for 25, 26, 27 years as an investment advisor, worked with, a variety of clients. And in the business, you always, you come to realize that your work isn't about crunching numbers and sharing PE ratios. There's a lot of psychology that's involved in it. And I was quite surprised to learn how closed many people are. Very well educated people, people who are very good at managing money, but if you ever even suggest that they get their children, their adult children, for example, involved, it's like, no, this is my money. I'm private about this. And so that kind of is a roadblock, even if you are educated. It's like, I think we've talked about this before, but it's like a taboo subject. There's certain things you just don't talk about. Now, I also spoke with many families who the children from a very early age were very engaged in the discussion, and I think it sets them up much better. But that's one thing we have to get over as a society, I think, is the taboo subject of money.
Why is that the case? Do you, like, from your experience, why are some families, for me, to me, if I'm thinking, how do I want this household to raise with Ava, what is the downside of being open about, sharing stuff like, oh, we pay the mortgage every month, or hey, this or that. I could see maybe some negatives where, let's assume you're either very, very poor and struggling. You don't want your kid to see that side of things. Yeah. I could also see on the other end, maybe you're an ultra rich, wealthy family. You don't want your kids to maybe know that you are this multiple wealthy person. I could see that being the case. But for people in the middle, why is there that hesitation to share this with children?
Well, and I think there's a generational divide. And I look at you and I look at me and I look at even like your activity online over the last 6 years or so. You and your peers are so much more willing to share information. And I grew up in the generation where you just didn't. I mean, you didn't share financial information. And even with I would have seniors come in looking for financial guidance, for financial advice, and they would be reluctant to share.
Hesitant to share with the professional.
With the professional. There's definitely a generational difference there. And that's probably the biggest thing.
So if we were to say scrap that and say, hey, blank playing field, what is the best approach for a family, in the household? Let's say you're sitting down for dinner, you're thinking, what are we chatting about today? Topic, current news, whatever the case is. Do you think that conversation of money should be on the table? Again, to what degree that may vary, but.
Well, I think it should be, and you will know this, I'll share it with our audience, but when you guys were young, I mean, we talked about money all the time, and just involving your children in financial activities, so that could take on a whole,
So I had a funny thought. I literally asked Ava last night. My daughter's name's Ava. I was just putting her to bed, and I just asked her, "Oh, what are you going to dream about today? Or what do you want to dream about tonight?" And what did I say? I said something silly like, "Oh, like elephants, something weird." No. I said, "Money?" She said, "Money. I want to dream about money today." She said, "Yeah." So. Yeah, he got ambitious dreams already.
Takes after her dad. Used to dream about race cars, but money was probably in there too. Because we would go to Toys R Us and we'd buy our little NASCAR models, but you had your allowance, and so I mean, just sort of back to the topic there. But the like family budgeting, I think it's important that children know that it costs money to run a household, whether it's taking them shopping. I mean, it has to be age appropriate. You don't want a troubled 4-year-old worrying about whether you could pay the rent this month. I mean, that's outside of their pay grade. But
and I do think that that's a huge point, is age appropriate, because even, for example, when I was older, I even think in my 10, 11, 12, whatever the case was, I wouldn't have been able to comprehend that we were paying X and X amount for rent or for our mortgage payment. That's still just not a number that really is relevant. So maybe like dumbing down those conversations where it's still open, but you don't have to get into the nitty gritty of, oh, well, here was our insurance and here's the property tax. Like no, that's too overkill.
Just the concept though, when you go grocery shopping, if you have your children with them, I don't care what age they are, give them the credit card that they can give to the cashier so they understand there's some sort of a transaction. And you had a little video, I think on Instagram recently, where you were playing Ice Cream Man with Ava, and she wanted the double cone, but you said, well, you got to pay for it. I think you charged her $17 for a double cone.
You can have a single scoop, you can have a double scoop, or you can have a triple scoop. Double scoop, that will be $17, please.
I got money.
You're going to have to get some then.
I got money.
What about your credit card right there? Alrighty, approved.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Would you like it in a regular cone or a chocolate cone? Yeah? Chocolate cone, coming right up.
It's criminal, yeah. But it's that's a good point. It jogged my memory. Like one of the things you did actually was, and I remember when we used to go to the grocery store. Again, this is probably back in the day when we could buy stuff with $1 or $2, but you would give us a bunch of quarters. I'd say a bunch. I think me and Jesse got 4 quarters or maybe 8 quarters. Yeah, something minimal like that. And essentially, we started having to make this very conscious decision about how we wanted to allocate those 4 quarters. And usually, it was just stuff like a gumball or like maybe a chocolate bar. Maybe you go for one big chocolate bar, or maybe you go for a few of those little twisty turny device, those game thingies where you get a few bouncy balls and stuff. But even stuff like that, I guess you did that very. Now looking back in hindsight, there was intention behind why you did that.
There was. It was called my own sanity. Because and if you remember, one of the rules, if I remember correctly, one of the rules was, let's say you got 4 quarters, but if you said, "Oh, Daddy, I want that," well, then you'd give me it cost you a quarter. So it allowed me to shop with you guys without being constantly bombarded with things you wanted. You learned very quickly. You just focus on what you want to buy and don't bother Dad trying to
take what you get. Yeah, you gotta take what you can get, right?
Stuff, yeah.
It's very fair.
But on that, and it's funny, you mentioned, I think you just said 11 or 12. And just before we sat down here, I dug out this old book that I know we've talked about before. And a few years ago, we kind of did a video like this. And this is an account book that goes back to June 1st of 2006. Maybe I'll put a screenshot on it. You probably can't read it on here. But this is the log, the sheet that we used for you and your brother. And you just kept track of, birthday money you'd added on here. And I was just laughing at a few of the things. You got $4 for 2 lost teeth, on June the 10th of 2006. But the rule was here, you'd accumulate your money. And then if you made a purchase, that was sort of discretionary purchase. Like, for example, you bought a lacrosse stick and it was $39.90. And the deal was every time you made a purchase over a certain amount, you'd have to take half of that. Do you remember this? And put it into long-term savings. So there's a line entry here, $39.90 for a lacrosse stick, and then long-term savings was $19.95. And that kind of, my goal there certainly was to make you think of, you can spend money today, this is your money, but you also have to provide a little bit for the future as well. And just as I look through here, it's hilarious. You bought a lollipop, that's kind of cool. We kind of, $1.50.
Canadian Tire, I think it was Canadian Tire lollipops, I remember.
My favorite, November 4th, you bought Magic Wigglies for $5.74. Whatever that is.
Can't say I remember what that is either, Dad. But you know what?
Go ahead. Dad.
Sorry to say, I was going to cut you off and say that is one of the coolest things about my upbringing. That when I ask, what were some of the things your dad did, and I share that, I had to take 50% of my purchase and allocate that to my savings. That's something that people struggle with today as adults. Yeah. You know what I mean? Take kids out of the equation. Like people, there's people that I have conversations with, I think even as recently as when I was in Toronto, and they're asking me, they're like, I just don't quite understand, like this whole saving for my future, investing, like, I could put some money in my RSP, or I can, live for the moment, this and that. Like it's weird how there's the concept of being able to do both isn't necessarily there for a lot of people. And we know the statistics of how many people, they have the high paying jobs or they're working their career jobs and they just spend it. They're going traveling here. They're out and about and they're putting zero priority on their future or investment. And hey, we're not saying to save 50% of your money. We're saying save 10, 15% of your paycheck. That's just, start with that. This was 50%. But I think that's a concept that even adults struggle with today.
Well, budgeting. And when you guys were doing this, you didn't have access to credit either. That's even worse today, right? When not only do you spend, not only do you not save what you have. And I get it. I'll just interject here very quickly. There are a lot of families that absolutely struggle. And I'm not lost to that fact. And if you are struggling and you literally, you can barely feed your family or pay the rent or whatever, well, you're not going to be putting a whole bunch of money away. It's survival mode. I understand that. But for a lot of people who are watching this video, you're not in those circumstances, right? But just things like that. Back to sort of the topic here, but just having the children involved in the budget, things like when you go shopping. I like what you did with Ava in that video. You had access to play money. So, and even when she was visiting with us here, my poker chips, she was using those as currency kind of thing. And so
I'll tell you another fun story. Just another side note. When we were in Japan, she was just starting to understand the concept of money because we had all of the coins. You're in Japan, you have all the yen and all the coins that you're collecting, whatever. And she somehow got very, very attached to the money. She just wanted to play with it, collecting it, whatever. And then we went down to a 7-Eleven, and I went and bought a bunch of candy or whatever for myself. And I put the coins in the machine, and she had a huge fit and broke down crying because
She wanted them.
she didn't want to part ways with the money. But that's a life lesson, sometimes you have to part ways with the money for the things you want. But she had a really strong attachment to the money, but she did understand how a transaction works. I think that was her first real.
She's a saver by
She's
heart.
a saver. She's a hoarder. Yeah.
Again, and I think we kind of have a few rough notes of what we're going to talk about, but this also reminds me of something when I was training to be an investment advisor back in the mid '80s, I guess, somewhere in that range. I remember taking a course, as you need to do, and I was disgusted with the course. I'll summarize a book this thick into a sentence or a phrase here or a paragraph. But essentially what the book was telling you is here's all the ways that you could suck every last dime out of your client. Like you position things so that if they have extra money, they give it to you. They don't go buy stuff, they give it to you because of course you get paid based on the money that you manage. And I always thought that was so wrong because if you have a normal lifestyle, you can do both. You can save, you can go out and spend money as well. You can buy things. It's just having that balance, right? You hear that?
I did. Yes, I definitely
fell off my desk.
Okay, I'm glad it was a light. I wasn't worried it was someone or something. But
No. But actually, I haven't told you this. Really, aside, yesterday we have a beach in front of our house, and there was a dead body about 200 feet down across from the front of our house. On the beach.
Wait, what? A dead body?
I told you that. A dead
You have
body.
not-
My neighbor texted me.
It's not funny.
And, what's that?
That's not funny.
No, it's not funny. But
No.
it's a true story. A dead body, I think, washed up on shore. Interestingly.
Yeah, it must. I think it must have been those witches that were spotted a little while back. Hey.
Oh yeah, they were eating the people. That's a couple of years ago.
Pop up an article.
So
Anyways, back to the topic.
A little bit here.
Sorry, I do think it's a good transition because you're talking about the courses, you're talking about the your studies and whatnot, and I had a question about books because one of the things that I think is a relatively new, maybe I'm incorrect on this, but I'm very aware of a bunch of cool like financial books that are now being built or not built, excuse me, they're being written, typed specifically for kids. And I think it's a cool way to start getting your kids in a very early age exposed to this stuff. Was that something that was around back when we were growing up?
No, I don't ever remember looking. I mean, we read a lot of books, but not money related. And in fact, a fellow advisor of mine, he wrote, which I think was one of the very first financial books geared towards children, not babies, but children. And I remember him just saying the work that went into it. And, you always think, oh, you write a book and you make a bunch of money. He just said, is at break even at best, but he had that mission to do it and he enjoyed it. But no, there was nothing available that I was aware of. I certainly didn't implement that into our strategies.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really remember much of the books growing up, but I do see how much Ava reads, and she loves reading books, and the books are all different things, and the amount of stuff she learns from the books are incredible, and it's I do think there's even a list I came across recently from one of our fellow Canadian creators, like a blogger, Jess Morgan, who I'll shout out, and she put I'll link this below or above, but she put together basically like a blog post of like 7 or 8 of some of the top Canadian books that she'd recommend for financial literacy. And there are some very, very cool ones here. Like, I mean, I actually haven't showed you this, Dad, but there's this one called like The Golden Quest, which I've heard many, many good things about.
Okay.
And it's exactly that. It's a book built for kids. And we're just reading here. It's a graphic novel about a young boy who embarks on a hero's journey with his dog to discover the golden rules of money. And on this adventure, he learns about spending, saving, investing, but it's obviously done in such a fun cartoon way where it's something that does appeal to the kids.
It's like a new richest man in Babylon for children.
That's exactly it. That's literally what it is, and I'm sure it's very probably similar principles that you'd come across in a book like that, just in a more digestible form for a kid. But these are one of the things where when I think about one of the ways I can implement this in my household, these are the no-brainers to me. Is to have these books lying around and have them part of their usual reading
Yeah.
cycle, right?
So only so many books about cats and monkeys you can read, right? Just spread it, caterpillars and yeah, no, that's good. We haven't talked about that specifically, but that is, I like that a lot. It's a good tip for people who are trying to expose their children to money at a, like, again, age appropriate level, right?
I'm even just thinking too now, realistically, the kids do read the books. They're on the iPad and they're watching the YouTubes, and that's a huge part of their entertainment as well. And I'm trying to think if any come to mind where the children's channels, if you will, cover money, and maybe some other parents can leave a comment down below if they have good suggestions. Where it's like if you're gonna be watching your 30 minutes of TV time, maybe make it something a little more productive.
But how are you going to memorize the wheels on the bus go round and round if you switch the topic to money, right?
Well, there's always time for both. The 30 minutes, yeah, 30 minutes usually gets extended a little bit. But no, shout out to some of these creators, these Canadian creators. I'll leave a list down below, but I have a couple names here. Maya Clifton wrote a book, and I think too, just getting back to your topic there, Dad, it's like, I don't know if these people are writing these books for profit. I think it's more of a passion thing. I don't think they're nationwide best. So they definitely have the possibility to be, actually.
Right.
There's a lot of kids out there, and this is definitely a movement where people are prioritizing this.
Well, that kind of segues to a topic, or to just a thing I wanted to say here is, I think everything we've said is start young, right? And young is different, but you can start from, like, your baby is 2 years and a couple of months, a few months. So you can start by exposing her in those types of ways. Then you're 5, then you're 7, then you're 10. And every stage you go through, you can get a little bit more involved. I think a key, though, is just make sure that you're doing it in a supportive and loving way, because money is stressful. Even investing, people get stressed out about if you have money, but if you don't have a lot of money, it's a topic that really gets people's attention, and it's not always positive. So make sure that you're not putting stress on a child. Another thing I want to just make sure we cover off, Brandon, is things like accounts for your children, and, for example, an RESP. When you were young, I had an RESP for you, but that was way back in the early days of the program, and they sucked. They were really restrictive. Over the decades, they've really become much more. There's options. Basically, you put the money in before. If you didn't use it for RESPs, you lost it. There was a big disincentive to put the money in. They've changed the rules. So RESPs, and I know when you went to school, we tapped into that. So that was a good thing there. For you and your brother, I set up in-trust accounts. And a lot of people still don't realize that you can do that. We get questions quite regularly, like, my child is, 15 or 10 or whatever. I want to get them involved. And you can they can't open a bank account yet. They can't open an account in their own name, but you can set up an account that's called an in-trust for account. And you are essentially the manager of that account, but it's the assets are in trust for them. So when they turn the age of majority, then you can just transfer the account over to them. And there's formal trusts, there's informal trusts. I mean, have a look at there. I just want to bring that to everybody's attention that you can actually do that. And I know for you guys, I set it up, and you guys started actually investing at a very young age, buying shares of, like, literally shares of Coke or, whatever companies you were buying back in the day. And so it kind of put that into your brain as well. Then you could learn how some years are good, some years aren't so good. But as an investor, if that's what your goal is, it helps set your expectations for investing as well.
For sure. It is one of the most common questions we get, and it certainly is possible. I wanted to wrap up with maybe one final question here, Dad, and get your thoughts on this.
Sure.
What do you think about, for example, I know very popular amongst the Asian community where I live, a lot of families, like parents, will save up money and then, let's say put that towards a kid's down payment. That's a gift that they give. It's, hey, you don't get allowance. We're not going to give you all this money, whatever. You go do your stuff. But, let's say you move out for generational wealth, the parents, it is a huge advantage when your parents can assist you, the bank of mom and dad, to help with a down payment. What do you think about that?
I think it's awesome. If you are in it, and I'll say this with some caution, because I worked with a number of families who were very, very wealthy. And it's easy to go over the top. It's easy to set your child up with the expectations that mom and dad will always be there to look after you. And it can be a disincentive or like just too much of a security blanket where you're not inspired to go out and create your own wealth and your own life. So as long as you don't cross that line, I think it's awesome. And I know, especially like, in British Columbia, the cost of housing in many places now is it's not the old days where you automatically at age 20, 21, you moved out, bought a place, a small place, a fixer upper or whatever. You can't do that anymore in a lot of places. So for a parent to be able to come in and help out is good. Now, if you are a parent or a grandparent who is considering doing that, I also worked with, I'm thinking one client who comes to mind but there's more, who was very generous with her money. And in her case, I won't get into the details of it, but there was some emotional reasons that she might have wanted to help out her grandchild. And she was basically willing to give her everything she had. Like, okay, I just need this basic amount here. And, let's say she was 70. I can't remember her exact age, but she still had a lot of lives probably statistically left. And so I actually had to counsel her, be helpful, but you got to look after yourself too. So there are situations, most situations probably are a fine balance, right? Where you need to make sure that you're not going to run out of money because your granddaughter might not be there for you when you need her 15 years down the road, right? So it's, but basic answer to that question, if you're in a situation to be able to help out that way, I'm all for it. Yeah.
I think it's super cool. And one of the things which you never did for us, but I've heard of is a, I don't want to say popular strategy, but let's say we're now talking at like slightly older kids. So your kid is now 16, 17, 18, 19, whatever the case is. And I think it's a really cool idea when let's say you start charging them for rent. You say, listen, Buck, you're living under my roof. You're paying X amount per month. And I my best friend growing up, he had to pay rent, which was so foreign to me. I was like, wow, your parents are charging you rent. That's so weird. I ended up moving out, relatively early, like 19, 20 anyway. So I wasn't there long with you, but I have heard stories where the parents will collect the rent to get them on that real life, get them that real life, like a taste of what real life is all about. But they'll actually be kind of saving it or putting it aside. And then let's say the kid moves out, they'll give it back to the kid and say, you know what, you learned your lesson, but hey, we actually, again, this comes down to what, if a parents are in a position to do so, maybe sometimes the parents genuinely need help with the rent. And then that's another discussion, but I do think that's like a fun little, I could see myself doing that where it's, I like that concept.
I love the idea. Yeah, I never did that. And like you say, you weren't living in the house when you were 30, or you're not 30 yet, but you left at a relatively young age. And so, yeah, we never got to that point where I would have said, okay, Bucko, time to start, covering your share here. But I know I've heard of that a lot. And I think I think it's a good idea. Generally, it teaches good responsibility.
I think so. And it's just like, again, sorry.
It might encourage the child to leave a little bit earlier too. If they're paying rent anyway, they might as well have their own space, right?
No doubt. Well, hey, I mean, my connection's been in and out here, and I literally see the bar coming back up, so it might be dropping off again. But I do think what I think a cool way to be wrapping up this video with is for the viewers, like, what have you done? What did your parents do? What do you plan to do? Like, share some tips in the comment section below about ways that maybe from this video that you liked that were new to you, or ways that we didn't even cover today that you think would be one that'd be valuable to share with the following here, because again, we're speaking from our experience, what happened in our household. There's many other households out there in the world, and we might be able to learn a thing or two for you. And like I said, I came up with this video idea, Dad, because I genuinely want to ask you for your advice and for your wisdom, because like I said, in wrapping up, like I'm so pleased and happy with how my upbringing played out in all respects, but especially on the financial side. And I want to be able to repay that favor, to my family now, right? So
nice.
That's
first time we've really talked about this with you as a father and with a child who's old enough to start comprehending these things. So that's awesome.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, hey, if you guys like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and we'll hopefully be seeing a bunch of you guys over the next couple of weeks. We head out in a couple days here. Toronto's already sold out event, so if you missed that one, well, you missed that one. New York, Montreal are in the following week as well. So, and then obviously Vancouver and Calgary, those tickets are still available. Those ones are not until July, but you can find those on Eventbrite. If you just search Eventbrite, Blossom Investor Social, you should be able to find those pretty easily.
And I might leave this in the video, I might not, I might cut it out, but hey,
Dead body.
What's that?
I said dead body. There's another dead body.
Oh, no, not a dead body, but no, just for those of you who are still watching, you know, it's always nice when people watch to the end. It's my birthday today, and so
Happy birthday! Of course, I was waiting for the very end to get that saying.
yeah, exactly. I know. Save the best for last. No, you were. I'm not a big birthday guy, but it's just kind of fun because it's nice when people watch the end and they go, "Oh, blah blah blah," you know, whatever. So.
Happy birthday, Dad. I was waiting to the very end to get to wish you that, but
I know you are. That's your style. So, so yeah, we'll know if you've watched this point. Just hey, happy birthday, Mark, and then we'll know.
then we'll know. Then we'll know. Or maybe one person will, and then the others will see that, and but
I'll be so depressed. Oh yeah, they'll cheat off of it, right?
they'll cheat off.
Okay,
of it.
good. Let's wrap it up.
What a great way to end. Very close to you, Dad. Have a blast of a birthday, and I'm sure I'll text you.
Thanks so much. Okay.
See ya. See you
Thanks
guys.
everybody for watching. See you.
Bye bye.